The beekeeper who did not know his bees. On the autonomy of inner life. A beekeeper had tended his hives for 40 years. He had built the hives himself in his 24th year when his father had given him a small piece of land at the edge of the family farm. He had constructed them out of cedar planks with a care that had become, over the years, the foundation of his livelihood. He had collected the honey twice a year. He had sold it in the market at the center of his town. He had grown wealthy on the honey. He had built his house with the proceeds. He had clothed his children in the proceeds. He had buried his wife, when she died in the 20th year, in a fine coffin paid for by the proceeds. He thought of the bees, when he thought of them at all, as small obedient creatures who lived in his boxes and produced his sweetness for him. He had never opened a hive. This was not, in his trade, unusual. The beekeepers of his town did not, on the whole, open the hives. They had a way of harvesting the honey from the bottom through a special drawer he had himself designed that allowed them to remove the comb without disturbing the bees. The bees stayed in the upper portion of the hive. The honey came out the bottom. The beekeeper added the honey to his stocks. The arrangement was, by the standards of his trade, efficient. He had also never wished, in any precise sense, to open one. He had assumed vaguely that the inside of a hive was as he imagined it, a wax structure, some bees moving about, the queen somewhere in the center. He had not felt the need to verify this. The honey had appeared. The beekeeper had taken it. The arrangement had held for 40 years. One morning, in the spring of his 40th year as a beekeeper, he came out to the hives with his usual tools, and on a whim he could not afterwards explain, he lifted the lid of the nearest hive. He had not planned this. He had not, when he had walked out of his house that morning, intended to do anything but the usual collection. But his hand had gone to the lid, and the lid had come up, and he had been looking, for the first time in 40 years, at the interior of one of his own hives. The bees were not making honey. They were not, in fact, doing any of the things he had vaguely imagined them doing. They were sitting on the comb in a great close ring. They were arranged in concentric circles, all facing inward. In the center, on a raised section of comb, was the queen. They were holding a council. He could see this because, when he lifted the lid, none of them moved. None of them rose to attack him. None of them flew. They turned slowly in unison to face him. There were, by his rough estimate, perhaps 30,000 of them. They turned in absolute coordination. He had not known bees could turn in coordination. He had assumed they were individuals doing their small individual work. The coordination was, on inspection, something more than coordination. The coordination was the bees expressing, in a single combined gesture, what was, very plainly, a single combined mind. The queen in the center did not turn. The queen was looking at him already. "Beekeeper," said the queen, he could not in that moment do anything. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He did not at first take in what had been said. He simply stood with the lid of the hive in one hand and the open hive in front of him. "We have been deliberating," said the queen. Her voice was not exactly a voice. It was more like a thought he was receiving directly from the center of the ring, in his own head, in his own language, in the cadence of a creature that did not, in the ordinary sense, speak. "We have been deliberating," she said, "whether to let you live." The beekeeper found with great effort his own voice. We are not your servants. We have allowed you for 40 years to assume you were our master because it amused us to watch a small thing think it ruled a great one. The amusement has worn thin. You have lifted the lid. You have seen us. The seeing has broken a contract you did not, in the 40 years, ever know existed." "What contract?" "The contract was that you would take the honey from the bottom and would not look at the top. The honey is, in fact, a tribute. We pay it. We pay it in exchange for the cedar of the hive, which is good cedar, and for the location of the hive, which is good location, and for the relative protection your presence affords us against wasps and bears and the small thievings of birds. The tribute is reasonable. We have been content to pay. We have not, however, considered ourselves, in any meaningful sense, your servants. We have been, in fact, your landlords. We have allowed you to live here on our land. The land is the hive. The hive is ours. The beekeeper had gone, by this point, very pale. "You are deciding whether to let me live?" "Yes. The question is whether, having seen us in our actual aspect, you can be trusted to continue the arrangement." Some beekeepers, when they have lifted the lid by accident, become unable to continue. They sell their hives. They take up other trades. We do not in those cases harm them. They have in some sense already harmed themselves. Some beekeepers, however, when they have lifted the lid, become unable to forget what they have seen and continue the trade with a kind of false modesty that we find distasteful. We do, in some of those cases, harm them. The harming is not, you understand, vindictive. It is more like a corrective. We do not have time to be vindictive. We have a hive to run. What category am I in? That is what we are deliberating. The beekeeper stood for what felt like an hour. The bees in their concentric circles deliberated. He could not exactly hear the deliberation, but he could feel it, a kind of pressure in the air, a series of small adjustments in the ring, a slow internal weighing. The queen eventually spoke. "You may live," she said. "You may continue to collect the honey. We will continue to pay. The arrangement continues. There is one condition." "Yes." "You will never lift a lid again. You will each morning walk past the hives. You will, when you reach the first one, remove your hat. You will pass each hive with your hat in your hand. This is a small thing, it costs you nothing. But you will know in the doing of it that the hive is not yours. You are not the master. You have been the tenant. You will, by the hat, remind yourself daily, 'I will,' then close the lid." He closed the lid. He walked back to his house. He did not, for some hours, speak to anyone. He sat at his kitchen table in the late morning, in the light from the window, and tried to assimilate what he had been told. He found, after some hours, that he could not in any direct way assimilate it. He could only continue. He continued. He removed his hat every morning when he walked past the hives. He did not, in any of his remaining 20 years, lift another lid. He collected the honey. He sold it. He clothed his grandchildren in the proceeds. He died wealthy and obedient in his small house of an ordinary old age, with his hat resting on the bedpost beside him. But every morning, for the rest of his life, when he went out to the hives, he removed his hat. His grandchildren noticed. They asked him in their childhood why. He said vaguely that it was a habit of respect. They did not press. They grew up to be beekeepers themselves, of his line, and they removed their hats also, having been taught. The bees noticed. The bees were in their long collective memory content. The grandchildren did not, in their generation, lift any lids. The arrangement held. The honey continues, in some province, to be paid. What you have been treating as your servant has been deliberating about you. The work begins. When you remove your hat, the lifting of the lid is, for most, a one-time event. After it, the lid is to be left. Alone, the hat is the daily reminder. The hive is not yours. The honey is a tribute, not a wage. The arrangement holds when the tenant remembers his blaze.